Children's apparel imported or manufactured in the US must comply with CPSIA. And CPSIA in turn applies to all products in the US with age groups of 12-year-olds or younger. Okay? So CPSIA can really be broken down into 4 parts. You got the step 1, you need to identify the standards that apply. Okay? It could be ASTM standards that impact, say, drawstrings, flammability requirements, and also substance restrictions, say for lead and so on, meaning that fabrics and, say, other parts like zippers, buttons, etc. must not contain certain restricted substances above the limit. So that's step 1, to identify these requirements, and these can have an impact on the design of the product. Say drawstrings is a maximum length. It can impact the materials that your supplier must purchase. And you may need to inform them that you must use parts that are, say, CPSIA or ASTM F963 compliant, just to give you an idea. So that's step number 1, to identify the requirements within the scope of CPSIA that applies to your specific product. And again, these can be determined by the age group. It can be determined by the product type, say does it have drawstrings or not, small parts, etc. Okay, and even the fabric weight within the context of flammability. Now that we've done that, it's time to move forward, and then we need to get our product tested. You can't just go to any testing company though. The CPSC only accept certain testing companies, and these are what we call CPSC accepted testing companies, and you can find a database on the CPSC website. Okay, so you type in a certain product name, you can filter based on country, and that way you can quickly get a list of CPSC accepted testing companies in a certain country and for a certain product category, which in this case would be children's apparel. If you will go to any other testing companies not on the list, then that test report is simply not valid. It's not, you can't use it as a verification of compliance. Okay. Now that you got it tested, so we completed step 1, we identified the safety standards and the substance restrictions. We got our product tested. Let's assume that it passed testing. Let's hope so anyway. Well, you're not done yet. You need to issue a children's product certificate. This is essentially a self-issued document. It's not a document you receive from the testing company or from the CPSC or the customs authorities or anything like that. No, it's a document that you just type yourself. You can find samples on our website. You can find samples on the CPSC the CPSC website. Okay, so it's freely available. In short, the information you need is product information. You need to clearly state the SKU, the model name, etc. You need to list the standards that apply to your product, and this must correspond with the standards on the test report. Okay, so there must be absolute consistency between these 2 documents. You need to state your company information, its company name, contact details, address, and finally, you also need to include information, meaning the company name, address, and contact details of the CPSC accepted company that issued the approved lab test report. Okay. Then there's also the tracking labeling requirements, and this is also a very important part. You need to, let me put it this way. Every single product, okay, every single piece must have a permanently affixed tracking label. That's not a sticker. It could be printed. It could be a sewed-on label, but it must be permanent, okay? So no stickers. So this tracking label must again include information about your company, the SKU, so that it's easy to identify that, okay, I got this product. What is the model number? What is the SKU? There's one more thing though, and that's the tracking component of the tracking label. And tracking within the context of CPSIA is referring to traceability. So you need to include what they call a batch ID. The format of this batch ID can differ. Generally speaking, you would need to have a time component. So let's say that I'm starting production right now, which is September 2022. That would be 0922. Okay, that way I can identify that this product was made during the production run that I say started or finished up in September of 2022. You would also need to include the product name to some extent, and you may also need to include information about the production facility. If you've got more than one factories, or if your supplier has more than one factory, then you would need to have this codified as well. And finally, you should also consider including the product name, the country code to some extent. Okay, or the mentioned product name. So if it's China, that could be the ISO code for China, which is CN, or VN for Vietnam, and so on. So in short, the traceability code or the batch ID must be present on every single tracking label. The implication of this is that you also need to update this tracking label for every single production run, because otherwise, how can you identify, how can you tie a product to a certain production run, which is the whole point. This is related to manufacturing defects that in turn, even with your best intentions, could have an impact on the safety of your product, okay? And the point, by extension, having a batch number permanently affixed on a product make it possible for you to ensure that you recall a specific batch, okay? The alternative would be that you have to recall every single product from the market that you have sold over the last X number of years, which of course wouldn't be feasible. So that's the point. That's why you need to have a tracking label. It protects your business and it also protects consumers, because that way, if something happens at some point, you can tie this manufacturing defect down to a certain production run, and you can recall items sold from that production run. Okay? So that's CPSIA. Other than that, you also need to take labeling, care labeling into consideration. So this is something that you see all the time. This is actually mandatory. You can either communicate care labeling through care label symbols. I think you have seen these. What you wear right now might actually have a few printed if you check the label here in the neck or inside the piece. In any case, this relates to washing instructions, drying, etc., to make sure that the consumer knows how to care for it and don't wash it with the wrong temperature and so on and so forth. Okay, you can also choose, at least that's the way it used to be, to communicate these not in the form of symbols, but as a written text, or a combination of both. Then there's also the country of origin labeling requirements, and now the care labeling requirements and country of origin requirements don't refer specifically to children's apparel. Okay, CPSIA applies to children's products, so that's why I started with that. But keep in mind that when it comes to care labeling and also country of origin requirements, this is agnostic when it comes to, it's not related to the age group, so it applies to all apparel for all age groups. Okay, but in any case, country of origin is just what it sounds like. Another thing that you see all the time: made in China, made in Vietnam, made in Mexico, and made in the United States sometimes. Of course, the country of origin must actually reflect the actual manufacturing country. So if it's made in Dongguan, that means it's made in China. Repacking your product doesn't change that fact. There's no way that you can go around that, and it's not something you should even consider. Other than that, you have to take state level regulations into consideration. I'm referring specifically in this case to California Prop 65, which is more extensive when it comes to substance restrictions, because I think it goes beyond, my understanding is it goes beyond the provisions in CPSIA. You have other regulations to consider, say in other states as Washington, New York, and so on. My recommendation is that you ask a qualified testing company to assess the testing standards that may apply on a state level for you. In any case, if you have other questions about children's apparel compliance, you can write a comment on our website below the article, or you can do the same thing on YouTube. And of course, you can subscribe if you want more compliance related videos. Thank you for watching.